Every new industry starts with a kind of chaotic, high-stakes race. It's a moment of incredible promise, but it's also incredibly dangerous. And today, we're going to dig into why most companies that jump into these exciting new markets, well, they just don't make it.
Let's start with just one number, 80%. Yeah, think about that. Within a decade of a new industry's birth, 80% of the companies that rushed in are just gone. They either fail or they get bought up. Either way, they've vanished.
So you have to ask, right, why? It's not just that these businesses fail. What's really wild is that they disappear. The market consolidates around a tiny handful of survivors, and then the door just slams shut behind them. This is the life or death struggle that really defines every new market.
And this whole phenomenon has a name that honestly captures its brutal reality perfectly. It's called the paradox of no return. And it's this predictable, almost unforgiving pattern of how industries grow up.
Now, let's be super clear here. We are not just talking about some flimsy startups that never really got off the ground. No. We are talking about companies with real products, happy customers, even healthy profits that, for whatever reason, just can't survive in the long run. They literally get erased from the map.
I mean, business history is just haunted by these ghosts. You have innovators like Tucker Automobiles. These guys were putting in seatbelts way before the big players were. Or even beloved local chains like Pumpernickel in Argentina. These companies were real, they were promising, but in the end, they just couldn't survive the storm that was coming.
So what is this storm? What causes this mass extinction event in business? Well, it's a powerful and totally predictable force that strategists call the industry shakeout.
Okay, so here's how it starts. In the beginning, a new market feels like a land of infinite opportunity. It's like a gold rush. That mix of super high growth and really attractive profit margins, it acts like this giant magnet, just pulling in a flood of entrepreneurs, all of them racing to stake their claim.
And this chart of the early U.S. auto industry shows the pattern just perfectly. Look at that vertical line. That's the number of car companies. It explodes upwards as everyone piles in, and then, boom, it collapses just as dramatically. That violent peak and then the fall, that is the shakeout.
Now you might be thinking, okay, but that was the car industry like 100 years ago. But check this out. Decades later, a totally different industry, personal computers, followed the exact same brutal path. This just goes to show the shakeout isn't a fluke, it's like a fundamental law of business evolution.
So here's how it goes down. The shakeout really kicks in once the market gets crowded. All those new companies are now forced to fight over the same customers. Prices start to drop, pressure mounts from every single direction, and then this massive culling begins. It turns into a brutal battle for survival that, let's face it, most companies are going to lose.
So if you're in one of these new industries, how do you make sure you're one of the few left standing? Well, the key is to completely shift your mindset. You have to stop just competing day to day and start building powerful, permanent competitive barriers.
And companies build these barriers on two different fronts. On one side, the supply side, the game is all about creating a cost advantage that nobody else can match. And on the other side, the demand side, it's all about creating unbreakable customer loyalty.
All right, let's break down the supply side first. The goal here is pretty simple. Become the most efficient operator in your market, period. And you can get there in three main ways. There's economies of scale. The more you make, the cheaper each one becomes. Then there's economies of scope, where you spread your big fixed costs across different products. And finally, economies of learning, which is just the simple truth that the more you do something, the better and faster you get at it.
And this example with Coca-Cola just brilliantly illustrates the power of scale. Coke spends an absolute fortune on advertising, right? But because they sell billions and billions of cans, their advertising cost per can is practically nothing. A smaller rival could never, ever hope to match that kind of efficiency. That is a supply-side barrier in action.
Now, over on the demand side, the strategy is totally different. It's about locking your customers in. You can do this with a super powerful brand that becomes part of who your customer is. Or you can create really high switching costs, making it a massive pain to leave you. I mean, just think about the absolute nightmare of trying to switch your whole company's enterprise software from SAP to a competitor. So here's the crucial point. A winning strategy is to build a fortress. This diagram kind of shows how those supply-side cost advantages create a really strong foundation, while the demand-side customer loyalty builds these high walls. And together, they form this protective moat around your business that's incredibly difficult for any competitor to get across.
Now, these barriers create really powerful, defensible companies. But what happens when the barrier is the product itself? Well, that's when we see the most extreme version of this whole consolidation thing. We're talking about the special case of platforms.
See, platforms are dominated by something called network effects. The more users they get, the more valuable they become for every user. I mean, think about it. Why do you shop on Amazon? Because that's where all the sellers are. And why are all the sellers there? Because that's where you are. It's this self-reinforcing loop that almost always leads to a winner-take-all situation.
Okay, so understanding these different types of barriers, supply side, demand side, and these powerful platforms, that brings us to the ultimate strategic lesson for any business trying to survive in a developing market. Because here's the thing you absolutely have to get: not all barriers are created equal. There is a clear hierarchy of power. Right at the top, you've got platforms. They create the most intense winner-take-all markets. Just below them, you have strong demand-side barriers that lock in customers. And finally, while they're still critical, supply-side cost advantages are actually the least dominant of the three.
This flowchart basically maps out the entire strategic challenge. It all starts with one question. Can you anticipate which type of barrier is going to define your industry's future? And once you figure that out, there's only one path forward. You have to commit, and you have to move with the aggression and speed needed to build that barrier and get to scale before anybody else does.
And this is maybe the most crucial takeaway of all. In a developing market, it is a flat-out race. Waiting around to see what happens isn't a safe, conservative strategy, it's a fatal mistake. You have to build your fortress before the industry matures and those walls go up for good. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. Surviving the industry shakeout is never an accident. It is always a strategy. So the question that every leader, every founder, every investor has to ask is this: are you actively building your barriers, or are you just waiting for the storm to hit?